Welcome to Joy Recovery Radio, the place where couples like you can discover healing and hope after sexual infidelity and betrayal trauma. We're here to share insights, strategies, and real-life stories that support both sides of the recovery journey. We're passionate about getting this message of hope and healing to as many couples as possible. The best way you can help us do that is by engaging with our podcast. Please take a moment to follow us on Apple Podcasts and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Liking our episodes and leaving a 5-star review also makes a huge difference, helping others find our community when they need it most. Let's dive into today's episode.
Today we're looking at an excerpt from one of our popular weekly meetings for a group that we offer called Conscious Contact. This group is focused on the spiritual side of a recovery program. It helps members develop a deeper connection with their higher power. We actually have a playlist that has a collection of these teachings on our YouTube channel called Conscious Contact. Or if you want to check out and attend a live group on Saturday mornings, you can go to joy-recovery.com and click on groups to find out more information. Let's go ahead and join this content at this time. What I'd like to talk about today is when it comes to the area of resentments, what do we do with them? How do we identify them? How do we process them? And how do we work through them? And specifically, I'm speaking from the perspective of the addict, the betrayer, who is feeling and experiencing some resentments towards their partner. But the process that I'm going to share today can be applied to any person who is experiencing any form of resentment and they're wanting to work through this. And so just to give a little context as to what we're talking about here, this is a particular process that comes from my study of scripture and my study of the behavioral science. In particular, I benefited greatly from the expertise and the work of a psychologist by the name of Dr. Robert Enright, who has been studying how people forgive since 1985. So for 40 years, he's been studying forgiveness and is considered in behavior science to be the leading expert on this. Taking some of his findings from his research and taking from some of the teachings of Jesus in particular, what I want to share is a 4-phase process in how to deal with our resentments. So the very first phase we're going to look at is what we're going to call explore. And what I mean by this is that we need to do a deep dive to understand and try to identify our resentments. Resentments, like many of our emotions as addicts, we have a tendency to suppress them. We have a tendency to bury them. The problem with that is, just like any other emotion, when we bury or suppress resentments, they don't just disappear. When they're buried alive. And they get stronger. They build up in both power and pressure. They have more intensity, and they have a tendency to resurface. That's actually what the word resentment means, is to refeel or to re-experience. And so if we're already used to suppressing our emotions, it can be difficult to identify our resentments because we keep them hidden and buried. They have a tendency to attach themselves to anger. And so when we feel anger surface, often there are some resentments that surface with that. And they become drivers of that anger and they intensify the anger. So let me walk you through a couple of things that you can do to help identify what are these resentments and where are they coming from. The very first area that is potential for resentments is actually differences with my partner. So these are not moral issues. This is neither right nor wrong. I have seen resentments that surface because one partner is a night owl and one is a morning person. I've seen resentments that can surface because one partner is more organized and structured and the other is more loose and unstructured, and that difference can be a source of resentment. I've also seen resentments as far as one person may be an introvert and one person may be an extrovert. So one person is wanting to socialize more and go out more, the other person is wanting to stay home, and that difference, which is not a moral issue at all, it's just a preference difference, that can be one area of potential resentment. One partner likes to be earlier on time, the other tends to run later, and they don't look at time the same way. So any difference with your partner can be fertile ground for future resentment. Related to that, but slightly different, would be expectations. It's been said that expectations are just future resentments. And specifically with us addicts, what often happens is we have these unspoken, unmet expectations. And we are frustrated, we are disappointed, we are angry, we are bitter, because we feel like our partner should have read our mind and should have understood that this is what we expected from them. So we expected one thing. We never communicated that to our partner. They don't meet that expectation. And that is a potential resentment. Sometimes these expectations can come from an area of unrealistic expectations. It can be, for example, I have this unconscious, unspoken, unrealistic expectation that I'm not even fully aware of, but it's still there, that you are to respect me at all times, no matter what, that you're never to raise your voice or say anything negative in any way to me or about me. And that includes in your flooded state. Now, when a partner is dysregulated and in a trauma response, it is completely unrealistic to expect her to be kind and gentle in that moment. But that can be part of our expectations. So this is unrealistic, and there's no person on the planet that can completely fulfill these expectations. But these expectations can become resentments for us. And then another question to explore as you're digging into your resentments, is this resentment that I'm feeling, is it valid or is it invalid? What I mean by that is, what we're going to find as we explore this deeper is that many of our resentments are actually falling into the category of invalid, that it's actually not about our partner. They just happen to be in proximity to us and we're taking it out on them. And these would be examples of invalid resentments. There's also the possibility, and you don't need to discount the possibility, that you may actually have some valid resentments. The reason being, we are all imperfect. We are all broken. And so any relationship between two broken, imperfect people is going to involve injury from time to time. And so that's just part of being human. That's part of being in a human relationship. And so perhaps your partner did something that was unfair or unjust and it caused injury, and you have some resentment towards them. And it is a valid form of resentment. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter so much if it's valid or invalid, in the sense that you need to go through this 4-phase process regardless. But what I have found is, if I begin to realize that my resentment that I'm feeling is not valid, it's invalid for a number of reasons, that can begin to soften my stance, my emotions, my perception, and my way of relating to my partner. When I realize this is not valid, this is not justified, this is actually not about my partner, this is about someone else. Let's look at some examples of what invalid resentment might be. One example would be what we're going to call projection. And what I mean by projection is specifically in reference to the 3 I's of shame. And you've probably heard me talk about this before, but just as a way of reminder, or if this is your first time to hear this, just a brief summary of what do we mean by the 3 I's of shame. Shame usually is a core wound from our childhood that predates our addiction. Often, for many of us addicts, all 3 I's of shame are represented in our core wounding. But the 3 I's, the 3 categories of shame, are insignificance, incompetence, and imprisonment. Now, I used to call the third one impotence, and I got some pushback on that one. So I changed the terminology to imprisonment because it still captures the same idea. First, insignificance. This is where there's a core wounding in our childhood where someone that was important to us caused us to feel unworthy, less than, not valuable, unlovable, not good enough, insignificant in some way. The second I is incompetence. This is where we were made to feel stupid, not smart enough. We don't have what it takes. We can't make the cut. We can't do anything right. We are a mistake and we make mistakes. That's incompetence. And then imprisonment is when we have this core wounding where we felt like we were absolutely stuck. We had no voice. We had no vote. We had no agency. We had no ability to affect change. We were powerless. We were hopeless. We were helpless. That's what I mean by imprisonment, the third I of shame. What happens in relationships is that sometimes our partner will touch one of those buttons and we have this strong, inordinate reaction to it. And we're really projecting. They really poured a little bit of salt or just gently touched that particular button. And what we're reacting to is actually the core wound from the past, not what's currently happening. And so shame in particular has a way of affecting the way we see our partners, what they say and what they do, and their intentions. And it often leads to a misinterpretation. And so in the midst of that shame, we assume that they hate about us what we hate about ourselves. We assume that they see us as insignificant. They see us as incompetent, or they're trying to imprison us, when oftentimes that is not their motive at all. But we misinterpret what they say, do, and their intentions, and we lash out at them for touching that core wound. That's projection. That's an example of invalid resentment. Another example of this would be what you could call asking the question, is this a primary or is this a secondary wound? And what I mean by that is, who else is in the room at this moment? So perhaps there's some kind of wound, or one of the three eyes is touched on by our partner. What we need to understand in that moment is, are we reacting to them, or are we reacting to the initial perpetrator that caused the primary wound? And this is actually just a secondary wound. So who else is in the room? What we may realize is that we are experiencing resentment and anger and bitterness and unforgiveness, but it's not just towards our partner. There's another person or a line of people that we're reacting to because they wounded us in the past in the same category or in the same fashion. And we're feeling some of the things that we felt from that primary wounding. And this is actually a secondary wounding. These explorations can help us understand, am I feeling resentment over simple differences with my partner? Am I feeling resentment over unmet, unspoken, or even unrealistic expectations? Are my resentments valid or invalid? Am I projecting onto my partner because of one of the three eyes of shame? And is this actually a secondary wound? And part of my reaction is to the primary wound and the person or people who inflicted that primary wound. So these are some ways to explore, dig deep, and find out, what are our resentments? Where are they coming from? What is the source? And would I put them in the category of valid or invalid? When you've done that work, you're ready to proceed to the second phase, which is what we're going to call commit. And what I mean by commit is, you ask yourself honestly, is what I've been doing so far with this resentment working for me? Does something need to change? Am I happy? Do I have peace? Is it affecting the way I relate towards this person? Or is the revenge or the anger or the bitterness, is it robbing me of my joy or my health physically, or my health mentally, or my emotional health? Am I ready to try something different? Am I ready to turn this thing around? Am I ready to try forgiveness? Because what happens with resentment, when we go into resentment towards someone, here's what we do in essence. We create this emotional prison, and we want this perpetrator to pay for what they did. We want to hurt them for hurting us. We don't want to let them off the hook. We want justice to be served. And so our form of justice is, we take this perpetrator and we put them in this prison, and we throw away the key. And I'm not going to let this go, because that would be unjust of me to just let this go. And so we put them in this prison, and the four walls of the prison are anger, bitterness, unforgiveness, and resentment, or re-feeling it over and over again. And as long as we hold on to these four walls, then the offender stays in the jail cell, and we want them to suffer. And that is a normal response to resentment. Over time, though, here's what we begin to realize. It's actually me in the prison. I didn't imprison the perpetrator. I imprisoned myself. That my anger, my bitterness, my unforgiveness, my resentment towards this person is harming me more than it's harming the perpetrator. That this is affecting me, that I have put myself in my own prison. Forgiveness, when you're ready to commit to forgiveness, what you're basically saying is, I am willing and I'm ready to set myself free. This takes a tremendous amount of courage. We have been holding on to the victim label for who knows how long. And if there's a victim, there's a villain. The perpetrator is the villain. The perpetrator is the enemy. And we put them in this prison because they are the enemy and because they deserve it. And some of us, we grow quite comfortable inside this prison that we made, because it's what we've known. And it's what we know what to expect there. There's no surprises. We grow comfortable in this prison, and we feed our resentments, and we're reluctant to forgive. We're reluctant to walk out of the prison because it feels like we're letting them off the hook. We're setting them free, and they don't suffer any consequences for this. Therefore, justice has not been served. But what we need to realize is, we're not setting them free with our forgiveness. We're setting ourselves free. Forgiveness is a gift that we give to ourselves primarily, and to the offender secondarily. So the question to ask in this phase is, am I willing? Am I actually willing to start the process of forgiveness? And this willingness question is very compatible with the 12 steps. Several of the steps among the 12 are what we would call willingness steps that prepare us for the work. You have to be willing before you work. So are you willing to be open to the possibility of a higher power? Are you willing to turn your character defects over to that higher power before you do the work of doing it? Are you willing to make amends to those that you have harmed before you actually do the work of making amends? So it's a willingness factor. And so in this phase, we need to realize that we are in a self-imposed prison, and are we willing to do the hard work of forgiveness? Realizing that this is probably going to take time. Similar to breaking a leg, we don't heal from it quickly. And as we go through this process, we may discover multiple layers of resentment. Are we willing to start the process for forgiveness? And what that includes with our willingness is, are we willing to let go of revenge? Are we willing to let go of any form and all forms of retaliation? When we feel resentful, we feel like we have the right to hurt them for hurting us. Are we willing to let go of that right? Are we willing to let go of the right to hurt them for hurting us? Then you're ready to go to the third phase. If you're not willing yet, then you need to keep doing some more work in phase 2 till you get to the place where you're ready to commit. You're ready to try something that you haven't tried before, and you're willing to do the hard work of forgiveness. So once you've reached that place where you're willing and you're willing to commit, now there's the actual work of forgiveness. And it is hard work.
At joy-recovery.com, we offer personalized recovery coaching to help you move from pain to purpose. We also provide supportive groups where you can connect with others who truly understand. So, whether you're battling addiction, healing from betrayal, or rebuilding a brand new relationship, you're not alone. We can help. Go to joy-recovery.com today.
You've decided that you're going to try to forgive the person who harmed you. And so now what you must do, or this won't work, is you've got to be open to looking at the offender from a different perspective. Because what happens when we are in victim mode, when we see them as the enemy, we have a tendency to narrow our view of them. And in a very real way, we begin to dehumanize the person who hurt us. We demonize them. We villainize them. We have a very difficult time finding any goodness in them. And so we have to intentionally renew our mind and go through a process. And a lot of the work of forgiveness is challenging our perceptions of the perpetrator. So let me give you a few questions that'll help you with reframing how you see the perpetrator. What we're actually doing here is we are honoring their story and not getting so caught up in our own story. And the very first thing you can explore as you do this work is, what was the perpetrator's childhood like? What was it like for him or her to grow up? And what you could do is describe at least 3 to 5 major events in their life that helped fashion who they are today. So you take a look at their origin and their childhood. And then the next thing you could explore is not just their childhood, but what was their life like at the time that they committed the offense towards you? What were they going through? Were they going through pain themselves? Were they under a tremendous amount of pressure? What were the circumstances of his or her life at that time that they harmed you? Try to imagine, what were they thinking? What were they feeling? What were they potentially experiencing? What was their reality possibly during that time? And could it tie back into a spillover from some childhood patterns or some childhood experiences? The third question that you can explore as you are trying to rehumanize the perpetrator and reframe how you see them is a similar question, and that is, what was the relationship like between you and them at the time of the offense? And this is where you can really start making some transformations in the way you see them by asking questions like, what was he or she like during the good times? There were good times. What were they like during those good times? What do you appreciate about this person? Now you're stepping into gratitude. What are you grateful for about this person? Think of at least 3 examples where this person showed either good judgment or good character. They showed integrity. They're not 100% evil, but when you're in victim mode, you begin to think that way. Now, we are not minimizing the harm that they did to us. That's not what we're doing here. And we're not coming up with substitutes for the offense that they did. We are simply trying to honor the good qualities that they have. And we're trying to have a more well-rounded, holistic perspective of the personhood, the humanity of our offender. And that ties in the next question, and that is, are you willing, are you able to see the shared humanity of your perpetrator? Are you able to see them as a fellow member of the human race? Perhaps you have been seeing them as a monster, as less than human, as an enemy and a villain. Are you able to bring yourself to the point to where you can see them as a fellow member of the human race who belongs on this earth just as much as you do, who deserves a place to live just like you do, and they deserve air to breathe just like you do? That they are, in all respects, a human like you, and they have needs, and they have fears, and they have hurts and pains. They have dreams and aspirations for the future. There's more similarities than there are differences. Are you able to go there? Are you able to see them as worthy of respect because of their shared humanity, for no other reason than they are a human just like you? This is not easy, and this could take some time, because what we're doing is we're rehumanizing the perpetrator. Now, the next question only applies if you consider yourself to be a spiritual person. and you have a higher power as part of your recovery. And that is, am I able to try and see, how does God view this person? Can I see them from God's eyes? Are we able to imagine that God could forgive them? Are they beyond God's grace because what they did was so awful and heinous? Or do we feel like God could still love them and God could still forgive them? And if you do believe in a higher power, what do you need from your higher power in order to truly forgive this person? How can your higher power help you see them differently? And then the final question to explore in this phase is, in light of these other 5 questions, how has your own view of the perpetrator now been changed? Has there been an impact? When you explore their childhood, what their life was like, their good qualities, what was happening in the relationship at the time, their shared humanity, and how God might see them, has that in any way impacted the way you now see them? If so, then you may be ready for the final step within this phase, and that is you give the perpetrator a gift. Now, undoubtedly, there's going to be some pushback to this. This step may really surprise you. It may even offend you. Why should I give the person who harmed me a gift? I'm the injured party here. I don't owe the offender anything. In fact, it's the offender who owes me. And you want me to give them a gift? The research actually backs this up, that this is one of the most effective ways to experience and demonstrate true, authentic forgiveness. That's why we want to do the work of these 6 questions of honoring the story of the perpetrator, because we want to replace the resentment that we're feeling, the anger, the bitterness, the unforgiveness, with some positive thoughts, feelings, and intentions and attitudes towards the perpetrator. And if you're not there yet, if you're not authentically there yet, you're not ready to forgive. Therefore, you're not ready to give the gift of grace. You're not ready to give them some kind of gift as a token or sign, expression, and demonstration that you have forgiven this person. So when we give some kind of gift to the one who hurt us, that's when we step out of the prison. That's when we actually break the power that this person has over us. Because in a very real way, we have empowered them, we have allowed them to hurt us twice. They hurt us originally with the original offense, but now they've hurt us because we've held on to it, and we've been the one that's in the prison. So the giving of a gift towards the perpetrator, it needs to flow from transformed feelings towards that person, that you've done the work of forgiveness to get to the point to where you actually have some positive intentions towards them. And listen, if you're not ready, we need to honor that. That's okay. This is hard work. You don't want to give a gift that doesn't come from a place of authenticity. But when you are ready, you want to be as generous and as genuine as possible with your gift. Now, what should I give as a gift? What does that look like? Well, it needs to be appropriate to your situation. And so let's say the perpetrator that you have resentment towards is no longer alive. This is someone who harmed you in the past and they're deceased now. One way that you could demonstrate forgiveness towards that perpetrator is to actually go to the gravesite and give the gift of flowers. And that is a token that I have forgiven you, that I extend forgiveness towards you. Perhaps it is a family member that you are estranged from because of the harm they did to you, and you've got a boundary where you no longer, for your own safety and well-being, you no longer have interactions with this person and you don't see this person. One token that you could do to demonstrate forgiveness is at their next birthday, you give them a birthday card. And though there's been silence for a long period of time, this is a demonstration of forgiveness. There could be tangible gifts. There could be intangible gifts. There could be gifts that they actually know about and they receive. There could be gifts that they don't know about and it's not transactional. You don't give them anything. You give them a gift because it's for your benefit, not their benefit. So if it's tangible, if it's someone who you still have a relationship with, it could be the gift of time. It could be doing some kind of act of kindness, some kind of act of service for them. It could be a smile, a hug, a note. It could be that I will now speak kindly to them. It could be that I will no longer speak unkindly or negatively about them. It could be that you're not going to give this person anything tangible, but you're going to give them a moral gift. And so I am going to, from a place of authenticity, I'm going to pray to my higher power that my higher power would bless this person. And I actually mean it. I want good for them. When you're able to give a gift to your offender, that's when you know that you have reached that place where you have done the work and you've renewed your mind and you've expanded your perspective and you are ready to forgive this person. That is the work. And that's the last step within phase 3. Once you've given the gift of forgiveness and you give them some kind of tangible expression of that, you now step into the final phase, which is freedom. And One helpful way to step into this final phase is to look at your own need for forgiveness. Now, I'm focusing on the betrayers with this video, the addicts who had sexual integrity issues, and we deceived our partners, and we betrayed our partners, and we were unfaithful to our partners. And for most of us, this action is the worst thing that we have ever done to another human being. And when we realize just how much damage we've caused to them and how wrong this was, how did that make us feel? How important was it that our partners that we betrayed, how important is it to us that they consider doing the work of forgiving us? And maybe they've already articulated it to you, or maybe they haven't. Maybe you've experienced the gift of forgiveness for them, or maybe they're not ready yet. And that's okay. We don't want to take this teaching. We don't want to weaponize it. We don't want to share this video with our partners and say, look, you need to go do this. So that's not the purpose of this video. But the purpose of this reminder is we know what it's like to need forgiveness. We know how important it is to us when we've done something wrong to someone that we receive forgiveness. And let that be a source of motivation to do this hard work. When we compare what we're having to forgive our partners for to what they're trying to forgive us for, there's no comparison. So we are in need of forgiveness. Let that motivate you to extend forgiveness towards your partners. Now, the question comes up, what if the resentment resurfaces again? And it probably will, because that's the nature of resentment. We re-feel it. We re-experience it. What do we do with that? I thought I went through this process and I still feel anger, or it surfaces again. Or there's a new offense that I got to consider all over again. What do? You go back and you do the same process. And you end up doing it over and over and over again. And each time it becomes easier for you to go through the work. When we look at the teachings of Jesus, it's really helpful because it helps us understand when he was asked, how many times do I forgive someone? He said 70 times 7. What the heck does that mean? Does that mean after 490 times we're able to stop this process? No, he wasn't speaking in literal terms. He was using Jewish numerology. 70 times 7 is the number for infinity. It's the number for perfection. It means you never stop because God never stops forgiving us. And if we look at the teachings of Jesus, he said some things that can provide really strong motivation for us to do this difficult work of letting go of resentments and forgiving those who have wronged us. He said things like, we are forgiven by God only to the extent that we forgive others who have wronged us. And that is a powerful concept. We find it in the Lord's Prayer where it says, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. That literally means to the extent or to the limit. God, forgive me to the limit, to the extent that I'm willing to forgive others. And so when we refuse to forgive others, we are impacting our own forgiveness that we receive from God. Jesus also taught things like love your enemies. So if you're in full-blown resentment, you see the perpetrator as your enemy. You see them as a villain. You demonize them. What does Jesus teach us to do with our quote-unquote enemies? He says, love them. Bless those who curse you. Do good to those who hate you. Pray for those who persecute you. Do you see what he's saying here? He's saying, forgive and give a gift to those who wrong you. What is the gift? It might be love. It might be blessing. It might be good deeds. It might be praying for them. He embodies this principle of working through the way we see the perpetrator and giving them some kind of gift as evidence that we have released this person. We've given them to God. We no longer reserve the right to hurt them for hurting us. We have forgiven them. And by forgiving them, we have released ourselves from that prison that our resentment was holding us in.
That wraps up another episode of Joy Recovery Radio. We hope our conversation today brought you clarity, comfort, or a new perspective on your journey. Remember, healing is possible and you don't have to walk this path alone. To learn more about how we can support you, visit us at joy-recovery.com. There, you'll find information about our individual and couples coaching practice designed to provide tailored support for both addicts and betrayed partners. You can also explore our various online groups, offering safe and confidential spaces for connection, shared experience, and growth. Thank you for joining us today. Until next time, choose joy.